Hi, it's Belinda here from Coffee with Belinda Downs. I've got my coffee. It's down here today, but it's actually coffee. I'm going the iced coffee. Well, no, it's not really iced. It's cold. It's good for a summer's day. So there's my coffee, and you're here, which is really important. Okay, I've got my notes down here. So a while ago, I did a video called About Voices where I talked about first person narratives and people using their voice. This time around, I want to go to the opposite side and talk about listening. But linguistics has something called auditory linguistics. It's basically studying the signals that hit the ear. Really, really interesting, but not what we're talking about here. Linguistics actually has a weak point, and that is that, well, it has two weak points. One, we're not really good at our own PR, public relations. The other thing we're not good at is talking about non-production. So what linguists study is production, or like speech production, sign production, even avoidance is production. What people do to get away from a linguistic situation. How do they avoid talking to somebody that they don't want to talk to? That's a form of production that we can study. But what I want to talk about here is how do we talk about not doing anything, i.e. not listening. So first of all, I want to talk about, mention I should say, one of my favourite books, and that is Hugh Mackay's Why Don't People Listen? Why Don't People Listen? Got it. I'm going to include a link in the description below, but also I would recommend that book if you want to talk about or if you want to read about listening. It's a really good book. It's gone out of print, but the ebook is still available. So yeah. But I have my own ideas and I'm about to share them with you. So I wanted to make a few points about how to listen. The first thing, it is really hard to listen when you're distracted. Distraction. Distraction is difficult because we can be distracted in all sorts of ways. One of the ways that I think about when we're talking about distraction is if somebody's on a tour and the tour guide is explaining what's happening in this great tourist area, like, you know, this museum and this and that, but the person on the tour is thinking about whether they left the oven on. Really simple things like that. Another form of distraction that I come across having a facial difference, a really great facial difference, is people are distracted by my face when they're talking to me. And so when I go to speak, they're not really listening to what I'm saying. And that's happened a few times, and I'm still working on that. But the big one for me is assumptions. When somebody assumes something about the person that they're listening to and that kind of blocks what that person is saying. Let me share a story with you. Quite a few years ago, I was a one-on-one tutor for some amazing Korean nursing students. I love them to bits. They're really great people. Now, I'm going to mention that they're Korean here because in their culture, this is the way they explained it to me. I couldn't understand why I was getting so many Korean nursing students as students in my to teach English as a second language. I was helping them with essay writing and things like that. They had to do the work, but I was showing them how to do it. Here's the thing though, as I said, I could not understand how I was getting so many Korean nursing students, which is great, but why? And then one of them explained to me something that I didn't appreciate until then. And that is that for this particular group of people culturally, they really admire hard work. So they would look at my face and go, well, you know, she's come from a really bad place, really low in terms of social standing. But she's a teacher, so that's quite high in social standing. And so she must have worked hard to get from here to here. I'm like, wow. So, okay. And I really appreciated that. Yeah. But that's an assumption. And I had to make sure that my students were listening to me when we were working together, and it all worked out really well, and I still really admire them. The next point in terms of not listening is context. Context is important because what will happen in one situation won't happen in another context. So the classic example for me is when I was younger, I used to live near the local swimming pool, and I didn't go to the pool often, but because of the way the street ran and the house situated near the pool, we would often hear children playing. It was really fun and not a problem until you heard one of the school teachers come in and use the pool just because they were people and they wanted to swim. And you'd hear this, "Hello, Mr. Campbell," and all the teachers' names, and it was really, really funny. "Hello, Mr. Campbell." And I remember one of the teachers telling me that if a student saw them at the pool, they would have a really big, long conversation with them. So the kid would be listening and be all ears and, oh, wow, this is really exciting. But the same child might not necessarily listen in the classroom. So, yeah, I hope they use the pool to their advantage. But, yeah, so different context, different listening. The next point that I thought was important was space. And I don't just mean physical space, I mean mental space as well. Does the person have the mental space to listen? And here I have an example where you have people who are in crises and under severe stress, and they really can't listen, and they make poor decisions because they're under a lot of stress. When those people are able to, I'm going to use the word defrag. It's a computer term, but I quite like it. When people are able to decompress properly, then they can hear better. So the last point is medium. Now, you might think, what does that mean? This is where my definition of listening is really broad. So I don't mean just auditory listening or seeing signs. I mean any way for information to get across to somebody else. I have a friend who is unable to speak unless he's planned to speak. But he's a brilliant writer. So I find, as a friend of his, and many of his friends find, that we have to listen to him in a way that still respects him. So we have to wait while he plans the answer in his head and then speaks the answer, or we get him to write it down and we read what he's written. The medium for him is really, really important. Another example of medium that I'm thinking of is the telephone versus something like social media. It's really interesting to see the change between people making phone calls. And you can tell my age because I'm literally doing this, not this. I grew up when we had these phones. So, yeah. There used to be a time when people would listen to people on the phone for a long time. But now, the medium has changed and you get text messages. So I think that's another way that our listening has changed. So, distraction, assumptions, context, space, and medium. They're just some thoughts that I had about listening. And so tell us what you think or what you heard down in the comments. Be really interested to see what you think, and we'll continue with this. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.